hopefully you guys have all been doing all right. We are moving on from our discussion of phyla now. And now we're going to try to apply our knowledge of phyla in classes to a new topic. All right, this is going to be pretty much our last organismal lecture, but it's about a group of organisms known as plankton. Right? What do you guys already know about plankton, since we've probably heard that word so many times before?
Small.
They're small, okay. Do you know any examples of plankton, maybe? Like, what's a plankton? I mean, give me an example. What was that? Phytoplankton? Okay, sure, yeah. Phytoplankton is something that we're going to learn today. Is actually a classification of a type of plankton. All right, phytoplankton versus zooplankton, right? The other one. Okay, so anyways, yeah, plankton is this tiny organism usually, and it floats around in the ocean, and there's a lot of them, right? We learned a few so far. Maybe you guys didn't realize they were plankton, but I'm going to show you guys every different plankton that we've already covered and some new ones. And then we're going to classify them. Okay, so in this whole lecture, we're going to be classifying plankton in 3 different ways. Okay, so we're going to learn that by the end of it today. Okay, so let's get started, right? Let's talk about some plankton that we've already seen before. For example, right, look, phytoplankton. This is like from one of the earliest lectures on primary producers. Okay, we're going to learn today that Cyanobacteria counts as a plankton as well, right? But we've seen these before, right? Different types of primary producers plankton. We've also shown that these guys are also plankton. You guys remember these? The larvae? These guys are planktonic larvae that float around, and then they do larval settlement and turn into an adult. Remember that? Okay, so we'll cover those, and we'll talk about what kind of plankton they are later, right? Here are their names. Hopefully you guys remember this. I'll have you guys tell me what they are at the end of the lecture if you don't remember. Okay, so this is the definition. Plankton. Plankton are defined strictly and only as free-floating organisms in the ocean. That's it. That's all. That's the only requirement about plankton. Does it say small anywhere in there? No. Okay, that implies some things that we're going to see in a second, right? The only thing it has to do is float around freely in the ocean such that its movement around the ocean is governed by the waves, not its own muscle power. Okay? So like a fish might float for a while, but then it can swim off and go from point A to point B, right? Well, plankton does not have that option. If it wants to go to point B, it has to hope the waves push it there, but the waves might push it to point C instead, right? So their movement is not governed by their own body, it is mostly governed by the waves and the currents, okay? The water is moving. So they're usually small and the waves are big, so they're at the mercy of wherever the water takes them, all right? And that's what a plankton is called, okay? And keep in mind, although most plankton are small, size is not a defining factor, as you guys can see. Okay? Most of them are small, right? So let's take a look at this. I told you guys that I'm going to be telling you guys about 3 different classification schemes for plankton. The first one is based off their size, actually. So we'll be able to see just how small they can get and just how big they can get. All right? So size classification is the first way to classify plankton. Here we go. All right. Femtoplankton, picoplankton, nanoplankton, microplankton, mesoplankton. Notice how I just add some sort of prefix in front of plankton, and it defines that type of plankton, right? It's not critical to know this number, all right? I'm not going to worry about that. But it is important to know the order, all right? So you know which one's the smallest one, which one's bigger than which one, and which one's the biggest one, something like that, right? So if we're doing the classification scheme, and I'm saying, oh, this plankton right here, that's a microplankton. What I'm trying to say is it fits within this size range, all right? That's all. Right? It's a size classification of whatever type of plankton that is. Okay? A little trick to memorizing this is, well, if you know your metric prefixes, this is pretty easy, right? It's just in order already. Femto means 1 quadrillion, right? 10 to the negative 15. And this is, pico means 10 to the negative 12, a trillion, right? Nano means a billion, micro means a million, and meso means middle, right? Middle, kind of like average, and that's what meso means. So these are the first 5 levels: femtoplankton, picoplankton, nanoplankton. We're going to see what types of organisms comprise each of these groups in a second. All right. After mesoplankton, there's a couple more levels, so let's check those out. After I explain what all those 5 were. Okay, so there's actually 3 more. Not sure why I didn't include them now, but whatever. Smallest ones, femtoplankton, right? What's a femtoplankton? Well, they might not even be living organisms, but we consider marine viruses to be femtoplankton. All right, they just float around. Right, here is a sample of seawater that's been concentrated with viruses, and they're so small you can't really see the virus. So what we do is we stain them using something called cyber green. In this case, there's a bunch of different types of stains that we can use, and then you can see them under like UV light or some other type of fluorescent, right? Like, and you see there's a bunch of viruses, right? Tons of viruses in the water. Okay, there's a bunch of viruses in the air also. We can't see them, we usually ignore them, right? Should we worry about going swimming if there's this many viruses? Maybe, but maybe not, because you gotta think about it this way. Viruses are adapted to infecting things that they normally infect, right? So I don't know if that makes sense to you, right? So if there's like a fish virus that lives in the ocean, right, it'll probably infect fish, right? If there's a human virus, it probably does not live in the ocean because humans live on land. So all these marine viruses, chances are they probably don't affect humans that much. So maybe it wouldn't be too bad, right? Yeah, Joy?
So what if there's like an outbreak in the fish or something like that? Since, I mean, of course we eat.
And then you eat the fish, right? That depends. So if the virus is dangerous to a person, then it could be bad. But if it's not, then it shouldn't really matter that much, right? I'd say it'd be more important to worry about how the virus affects the fish and if it makes the fish toxic or not. Because like when things start to die, then they become a little bit toxic, right? They release poisons and stuff. So maybe that might be a problem, but it's not because the virus is making you sick. It's probably because the fish is bad now, right? Yeah, a good question. Okay, so femtoplankton, the smallest group of plankton, is comprised of viruses. Okay, let's try to predict picoplankton, the next level up. What do you guys think? What types of organisms do you think are in picoplankton? It's going to have to be bigger than a virus. Any guesses? Maybe, yeah, maybe like a bacteria. Exactly. Okay, you just got to think, what are the smallest organisms we know, right? Probably the first thing to come to mind, bacteria. So turns out picoplankton is made up of archaea and bacteria, both very small, single-celled, simple organisms, which you guys should remember, archaea and bacteria are two of the domains. Remember, domain is the highest taxonomic level, right? Bacteria being a ubiquitous, single-celled, simple organism that lives all over the place, whereas archaea is a single-celled, simple organism that lives where? Do you guys remember? Okay, so that's funny. You got high intensity from warm bloodedness yesterday. Okay, but they live in extreme environments, right? Okay, like really difficult to live environments, right? Extremophiles, right? Crazy, very inhospitable environments. So this is just a real quick reminder of what an archaea is. It's like a bacteria, but it prefers to live in those places, right? So archaea and bacteria, these two domains form picoplankton, all right? This makes sense because both of these are simpler and smaller than the other domain, right? What is the complex domain called? Eukarya, right? Eukarya, all the complex animals and plants and fungi and protists, those things are probably bigger than these, right? The more complicated, the bigger, right? So you can probably imagine that when we go next level up to nanoplankton, we'll be seeing some eukaryotes, right? As we go up every time, it's 10 times bigger. Okay, so if we see some eukaryotes, let's predict. What types of eukaryotes do you guys expect to see? You guys expect to see an animal? You guys expect to see a plant? What do you guys think? Larva? Maybe, so you're saying animal, basically, right? Because larva is animal. But is animal the smallest eukaryote? Probably a protist, right? Since we're going from smallest to biggest, the first eukaryote we're going to see in this size increase is probably going to be a protist, right? And that's exactly what we're going to see, right? So nanoplankton, we start to see eukaryotic organisms, and these are all protists, right? So just a quick review of what a protist is. A protist, also known as a protozoa, is just a eukaryote, but it operates under a single cell only. Right? So here we've seen Copepods before, we've seen Sargassum. You guys should know what this is made of because it's obvious, right? And here's a new one that I hadn't showed you guys before, Cryptophyte, right? guys are protists. Okay. Now, if you guys stayed behind after the test, we went out to that little pond and we collected some pond water, right? And hopefully you guys saw some of those protists, right? Those were protists. If you guys haven't seen them, well, I actually went back to the pond today and I crushed a piece under the slide, and hopefully we'll be able to see something, but I wonder if we will be able to, because last time we went, the water level was like less than half an inch maybe, right? Today it's like completely dry, all right? So I just took a sample of the moss, and I just crushed it in the water, and I put some tap water to kind of like make it cool again, or cool, but wet again, sorry, to re-moisturize it, and then maybe we'll see some things coming back to life, because remember, simple things, you know, they can do crazy things like regenerate and stuff, who knows, they might come back to life, right? Okay, so if you guys get the chance to, during the break, definitely take a look at some protists under this microscope. Okay, so yeah, those are very cool. All right, so nanoplankton, those are protists, right? Okay, continuing onward, I have added this one. This is not a protist, it's a type of bacteria, but does it have to be a protist to be a nanoplankton? What does it have to be in order to be a nanoplankton? Yeah, it has to be between 2 and 20 micrometers, right? And here we have Cyanobacteria, in particular this one called Prochlorococcus, right? Cyanobacteria, although it's a bacteria, is a big bacteria, right? And it is within the nanoplankton. So there you go. It turns out Cyanobacteria is a type of plankton too. Let's try to reason that out. Is it an organism? Is this an organism? Yeah, it's alive, right? Does it float around and not swim? Yes. So that's it. It's a plankton, right? As long as it floats around and doesn't swim, it should be considered a plankton. Okay, so that includes bacteria as well. Okay. So next group up from nanoplankton is microplankton. Okay. Microplankton. Micro means a millionth, but it also means small. And here we see the normal phytoplankton that we have been talking about so far, the Protist and phytoplankton. All right, let's try to remember. What are these called again? What are those? Dinoflagellates. Yeah, and what are these ones right here? Those are diatoms. You guys remember what diatoms are made out of? It's not calcium carbonate. Silicon dioxide, right? Those ones are silicious. Don't forget that one. Right? There's only 3 silicious organisms that we talked about. One of them is diatom, the other one is silicoflagellate, and the last one is a type of sponge called hexaconella. Okay, yeah, so we have our normal Protist and phytoplankton within the microplankton. Notice we have not seen any animals yet. Okay, that's because, well, animals, they might be more complicated, they might be bigger, right? So if they're bigger, they might be in the next group up, which we'll see right here, mesoplankton. Mesoplankton is the first instance, or well, it's not. There's some really tiny animals, but I didn't mention them. But most of the animals are going to be found here within mesoplankton. And we're going to learn the names of a few of those, like probably about half of them. Okay. So animals start to appear under the mesoplankton. Okay, now mesoplankton is as far as the list of 5 types of plankton that we went up so far. So we have 3 more groups. The 3 more groups that are bigger than mesoplankton, what types of organisms do you expect to be in those groups? Like plants, animals, bacteria, protists? What do you think are going to be in the groups that are bigger than mesoplankton? What was that?
Animals.
Probably more animals, because animals are just big in general, right? So we go up to the next group from mesoplankton is called macroplankton. Macro means big, okay, so it's the opposite of micro. And here we see one example that we've seen before, krill, right? An arthropod that whales like to eat, right? And the crab eater seal likes to eat. And we notice that it falls within the size range, 2 to 20 centimeters. Now 2 centimeters is this big, and 20 centimeters is like this big, right? 8 inches. So we gotta think, krill that is usually 2.5 inches, how is something this big considered a plankton? How is it? Because it floats around and it doesn't swim against the current. That's all it takes, right? It's not about the size, it's about its behavior in the ocean, right? Okay, so it just floats around krill and is considered a plankton, right? They can swim a little bit, but not like faster than the waves, right? Okay, so as you guys can see, we're gonna just get bigger and bigger. 20 centimeters is this big. How much bigger can we get, right? Well, keep in mind, size doesn't matter, so we can get as big as you want, right? The next group up is called megaplankton, and it is from 20 to 200 centimeters, right? I don't know if anybody in this class is 200 centimeters, right? Because about 180 to 190 is 6 feet tall, right? So, and I'm 173 personally, so 200 centimeters, we're getting into territory of some really big plankton at this, right? So what could possibly be this big and not be able to swim well? Anybody have any ideas? What could possibly be this big? It can't be a fish. What was that? Maybe it could be a plant. That's a good suggestion. Tiffany, you have an idea?
Would Nigerians count as plankton because they don't swim, or they just?
So you're thinking like a jellyfish, right?
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Jellyfish are considered plankton, right? Why? Because they don't swim very fast. They don't swim in any direction because they don't have a brain, right? In fact, they end up washed up on the beach all the time, right? Why do they end up washed on the beach? Are they dumb? Yes, they are, right? that time you actually have to say they are, right? They get washed up on the beach because they cannot fight the current, right? So jellyfish are considered plankton, and guess what? Here we have Sargassum, which is a type of algae, which is also considered a megaplankton, right? We'll go over each of these and talk about why, even though they're so big, we should consider them plankton, right? So we'll talk about one, jellyfish, right? Jellyfish. All jellyfish are plankton, right? Why are all jellyfish plankton? Because they're kind of aimless, right? They float around, they swim slowly, but they're not really trying to get anywhere. So even if they're this big, the biggest jellyfish in the world, it is still considered a plankton. Okay? So all jellyfish are plankton. That's the rule, right? Rule of thumb. Second one that we saw, Sargassum, right? Let's look at this. Sargassum is an interesting macroalgae because it does not have a hold fast. It does not require a hard substrate to hold on to. It just floats around in the middle of the ocean, right? So floating macroalgae. Why is this considered plankton? This might blow your mind because I never thought of seaweed previously as being a plankton, right? I mean, it's just a plant that lives in the ocean. How is this considered a plankton? You just gotta go back to the definition and realize that if you guys consider these protists to be plankton, right, these little plants basically, then what's stopping us from believing that the big plant is not a plankton, right? So this big one right over here, let's ask ourselves some questions. Is it alive? Is it an organism? Yeah, right? Does it swim? Well, I hope not. It's a plant, right? Plants don't move. So I guess that means it's a plankton, right? Considering how big it is, I guess it's a macroalgae, right? Now what is complicated is not the sargassum, right? It is something like this, who lives on the sargassum. See this? Sargassum crab? What do you guys think? Is this thing that lives off of this thing that floats around the ocean, is that a plankton? That one's tricky, right? I mean, if you look at the big picture, it kind of is, but if you look at it individually in its own little world, it's not, right? Because it crawls around on this thing. Yeah. But considering the fact that these crabs can swim from one sargassum to another, then I guess we should not consider it a plankton, right? Yeah, Joe, right?
No, those more like deep sea things, because they're actually seeing one, I guess.
Oh, it's not like deep sea. It can't because it's an algae and needs the sunlight. But I think I know what you mean. I think you mean like open ocean,
Yeah.
like far from the shore. And yes, because if it's close to shore, then it might as well just be anchored to the continent of the shelf, right? So yeah, this is something that you find in the open ocean, right? Not close to shore. Because close to shore, you have continent of the shelf. You have a bunch of like kelp or something that just holds onto the bottom, and those are not plankton, right? It has to be floating to be considered plankton. So So these we probably find in waters too deep to enable you to grab onto the ground. That makes sense? Okay. All right. So just a quick not recap, but a quick kind of like a refresher. What phylum is this in? What do you guys think? Any guesses? Why do you think that? Because it looks kind of brown. Good, right? If Sargassum is in phylum Phytoplankton. Okay. All right. So are we all good with this? Okay. So we've just finished our discussion of all the different types of size classifications for plankton, right? And keep in mind, it could be whatever type of organism. It's just that it has to fit within the size range. And here we went through all the different size ranges and what possible organisms are in each. Okay, so that's the first classification scheme. Okay, now let's look at this. What is this? Yeah, ocean sunfish, mola, right? Now this thing doesn't even have a tail. It just has this dorsal fin, and I don't even know which fin of this is. Probably the anal fin, because pectoral fin's here. Right, so this guy, probably a very weak swimmer, right? Let's see just how fast it swims, right? Let's look at this little video. Okay, we see this video swimming along in the aquarium very, very slowly. All right, this guy reaches top speeds of about 2 miles per hour. That's like less than walking speed, right? So pretty slow. And let's just think, should we consider this a plankton? Well, maybe, all right? It does swim, right? Clearly in that video, it was going from point A to point B by swimming. However, what else moves at 2 miles per hour? Ocean gyres themselves can move up to 2 miles per hour. So if you want to talk about relative to the water currents around it, then maybe it is a plankton. Okay, so some scientists would consider it a plankton, some wouldn't. But if it does swim indeed slowly enough, then sure it's a plankton, right? Okay, so yeah. Anyways, do you guys know how big this thing is? Well, you guys saw that video. That one was pretty big, right? It was like this big. But they can get up to 11 feet, okay, from tip to tip. Okay, and that's pretty big, right? Really big, slow fish. Right? The ocean sunfish can be 11 feet. So if that were the case, what kind of plankton would this be, based off what we just learned? A megaplankton, right? Obviously, because I mean, it's not going to be anything smaller than that. It's huge, right? A megaplankton. But we would also classify it as a zooplankton, right? Why? Because it's an animal, right? And animals eat. So that gets into our second classification scheme. Whether you are a producer or a consumer. Okay, so we're going to go to second classification scheme. If you're a producer, you're this type of plankton. If you're a consumer, then the other type. And it's really simple. This is it. Phyto and zoo. Right? Phytoplankton is a producer. Zooplankton is a consumer. That should be the definition that we're looking at. We should not be looking at this in terms of this is plants and this is animals. Okay? Like phyto, that means plants. Okay, zoo, that means animals. That's true. However, this is not even a plant, right? What is that again? What kind of organisms are these? These are not plants. They're protists, right? So those are protists, and these may indeed be animals, but we should not limit ourselves to just plants and animals to be phyto and zoo. Instead, we should say anything that's a producer is a phytoplankton. Anything that's a zooplankton, or sorry, anything that's a consumer is a zooplankton, not just animals for that matter. Okay. So going by that definition, talking about phytoplankton first, right? Phytoplankton, as long as it's a producer, it's a phytoplankton. So for this part's going to be a really easy review. We have seen all the examples that I would like to show you guys of phytoplankton already. Okay, so let's go over them real quick. Diatoms and dinoflagellates, phytoplankton, right? They're producers. That one's made of silicon dioxide. Copepods, another producer. This one's made of calcium carbonate, right? And all together, remember, we got macroalgae, Protist and phytoplankton. Even cyanobacteria is thus considered a phytoplankton. Does that make sense, right? Cyanobacteria is a producer, therefore it's a phytoplankton, right? So all these guys, phytoplankton. Well, I mean, this one's not because this one's attached to the ground, but if we're talking about something that's not attached to the ground, for example, Sargassum, that would be a phytoplankton. Okay? Alright, so phytoplankton is a producer. That's it. Okay, so going back to the trophic pyramid, we put our phytoplankton down here, right? In most marine food webs, we'll see phytoplankton or a form of producer down here, usually a phytoplankton. Okay, the first food web that we're actually going to talk about in this class, the bottom, is phytoplankton. Okay, so that leaves us with a primary consumer that eats these guys. All right, what's that one going to be then? Well, these are tiny little phytoplankton, probably going to be eaten by tiny little animals, right? And those tiny little animals are going to be our zooplankton, right? So let's talk about zooplankton. Zooplankton are consumers. They eat, right? Producers produce their own food via photosynthesis or another means that we're actually going to learn something besides photosynthesis. And zooplankton are consumers that obtain their energy via eating, right? Okay, so they eat other things, they usually do not produce their own food. So let's take a look at some zooplankton, right? Here is a copepod, right? Copepod, the most common zooplankton out there, right? If you guys go take a sample of plankton through like a plankton net, then you will find a bunch of copepods. Right? Has anybody done like a plankton tow before, by the way? Anybody? Nook, you did one? What do you use to do a plankton tow? It was a long time ago. Do you know what it was shaped like?
Kind of like a funnel.
It was like a funnel. How big was yours? Small one? Oh, okay. All right. Well, they're usually pretty big, I'd say. Here's like a boat, right? And then on the back of the boat, they're dragging a net, okay? So here's the opening of the net, and it's a really long funnel, and at the end of the funnel, you have a collection jar right there, right? Now this thing, okay, this thing is, I'd say it's usually about, on average, 4 to 6 feet long, around there, okay? Plankton net with the opening size about this big to this big. Right? You just drag it through the water, and this is this really fine mesh, and hopefully all the plankton gets caught in that when you drag it through the water, and then at the end you use a hose to wash it all into a collection jar, and you get a concentrated sample of plankton, right? So Zach, you have a question?
Is it like a windsock?
A windsock?
Yeah.
You know, I don't even know what a windsock is. What is that?
It's like to check the airspeed. Like
Oh,
at airports, you know? It's like big orange.
Oh, I know what you, okay, it looks, yes, it does look just like one of those. Yeah, those orange things, right?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that was what it was for. Cool. Yeah, it does look like that, but the end opening is not, or the back is not open, right? Yeah.
Is it called a moss net or something like that?
A moss net?
Yeah.
I've always just thought it was called a plankton net. Yeah, but you can look up what a moss net is.
I think I might have used that one.
What's a moss net? Let's see. You've used it before? What did you catch with it?
I think it was, I don't like it, so like, picture on the phone.
Moss net. This is something for growing algae.
Maybe it's called something else then.
It was probably something else
Yeah.
because it doesn't show it as plankton. So yeah, this is called a plankton tow, right? So you get this kind of structure right here. Okay. So the one time I used one, and you know the opening was this wide, and the whole thing was I'd say about 6 to 8 feet long, right? And then there's this boat, okay, in the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, because that institute is actually on a small island about 200 meters from the actual island of Hawaii, and you take a small speedboat back and forth if you want to access the facility, right? So I just asked the guy if he could take me for a short ride, and I'll pull this plankton tow behind me. And he says, do you have like a harness to, or a clip to put on the boat? And I'm like, no, I'm just gonna hold it myself. I was like, no, you need one, trust me. And he's like, no, you need the harness. And I'm like, wait, I think I can hold this, you know? It's like, okay, it's gonna be really, really hard, okay? And I'll just go really slow for you. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. So then he went at super slow and I was struggling to hold it. It was so much drag, it was incredible. So we only went for like 100 feet, and then we went back because I got tired. But like I got a lot of plankton, so it was cool. It was worth it. Yeah. But yeah, usually I guess you shouldn't hold it yourself. Okay, so anyways, this is the copepod, right? The copepod is really important that we know the name of this copepod and we know what it looks like. Okay, so let's all draw one real quick. Right? Super easy. You just gotta draw like a sausage shape, and then you can put a couple lines if you want. You don't have to. Give it one eye. I'll explain why later. A shrimp-like tail, and 2 antennules like that. And there you go. You have a copepod. And if you want to put CD on the antennules, like little hairs, you may. Right? There you go.
How do you spell it?
Copepod. Okay, so I'm going to show you. Copepod, right? Plankton from SpongeBob is a copepod. Okay? And you know what? To be honest, it's pretty accurate, right? You think this is a cartoon, but it's actually pretty accurate besides the number of legs it has, right? Because let's compare the anatomy of plankton versus the anatomy of actual copepod, right? Okay? We notice that he has antennules, 2 of them, and he has 1 eye. Guess what? That's actually the truth. A naupliar eye, right? Copepods have a cyclopean naupliar eye, right? There it is. Right there. Copepods have 1 eye. And they have these antennules with these little hairs on them. What do you think they're trying to do with those hairs? You know, actually, they move using their legs. A good guess. Yeah. What do you think they use it? Their little hairs on this for? Sensing? Probably. Yeah, that's probably one good usage. What's a better usage? Yeah, Joe Brian?
It's like a shock to food.
Oh wait, a what for food?
Is it like, I don't know, is it like the cat's food?
How did, like, what kind of feeding style are you talking about?
Never mind.
You know what? You're on the right track. It does have something to do with food. So with that in mind, what kind of feeding style do you think you can use with antennules that have hair on it? Filter feeding, maybe? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Copepods engage in filter feeding, and they do so using their antennules. Right? The antennules have the little hairs on them. Hopefully, they can catch the plankton, and then they move the plankton towards their mouth. Okay, so let's watch this in action, right? Here is a guy who owns several copepods and he feeds them, right? We can see what he feeds them as well. Okay, first thing to notice is, here's a close-up on one copepod from the sideways view. Is there a direction to the particles around him? Do you see is there a direction? What do you guys think? If there is a direction, which way is it going?
Towards him?
What was that?
Towards him?
Well, up or down?
Down.
Down. That one, it was going down. Okay, I'll explain why in a second. All right, let's look at what he's feeding them. Dinoflagellates, green algae, red algae. Hey, look, we know the phylum of those. What phylum is that? Rhodo, and what's this one? Chlorophyta. Look, we can already identify these little algae, right? Okay, so he's feeding them these little phytoplankton, okay? Those red algae, the green algae, and the dinoflagellate, and we'll see what happens, right? I'm going to show you right. Oh, actually, let's just watch this part first. He drops it in, and there you go. All of the little dots are phytoplankton. Okay, but I'm gonna skip ahead, right, so I can show you guys something. Okay, so right now they're eating, and then you can see that motion. Tiny, yeah. They're like they're mesoplankton, so less than a millimeter. Okay, so let's pay attention to this part. He just drops all those little things in the water. Apparently, those phytoplankton, some of them can swim because, I mean, dinoflagellates, they have a flagellum, so it makes sense that they might be able to swim around. 15 minutes later, what do you see? What was the difference? I think he does it again. All right, so this is that first. 15 minutes later. So what happened? What was that?
They're like stagnant.
Oh, okay, they stopped moving, but not only that, how many are there? Okay. So before, after. You guys see the difference, right? Oops. A lot and a little. What happened to them? They got eaten. They got filtered out of the water via filter feeding, right? So there you go, right? Copepods doing their filter feeding. So let's talk about that motion of the water around it. Okay. The copepod was doing that deliberately. Okay. If it just sticks its antennules out, it will only be able to catch a few phytoplankton in its vicinity. What's it going to do about all the phytoplankton that are far away? It can't get them unless it swims over to them. Okay. But how about not swimming, just staying in one place and creating a current that brings the water and the plankton towards yourself and through your net, right? That's called a feeding current. Oops. Okay, so you create a little feeding current that forces the water through your net, and then now you can just lie there and catch all the plankton through your net. All right? Do we know of another organism that creates such a feeding current? Sponges. Yeah, exactly. Remember the feeding current produced by the choanocytes? You put the little dye around the bottom or the sides of the sponge, and then it gets swept inside by its feeding current, and it comes back out the top, which is called the osculum. Right. Okay. Make sure we remember the anatomy of the sponge. Okay, but this is a copepod, right? A type of plankton sets up a feeding current so that the water is forced past its antennules, and it's able to do filter feeding, which hopefully we all know the definition of filter feeding now. Okay, so clearly, as we saw in that video, copepods are herbivores, right? They eat not animals, right? They don't eat animals. They eat protists, right, or plants. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at examine some other filter feeders real quick now that we've talked about all of them pretty much. Okay, let's just go through here and name all their phyla and classes real quick. Okay, we'll start with this one. What's their phylum? Chordata. Right, you guys gotta know this one. What? Okay, this one's obvious. What is its class? Wait, what? What'd you guys say? Now everybody's unconfident for some reason. Come on, you guys. This is literally the easiest class. It's Mammalia, right? Okay. What about this one? What phylum is this one? Phylum, guys. Chordata. Yeah. And what is its class? Chondrichthyes, right? Along with sharks. Okay. What about this one? Phylum? Mollusca. Good. We got that one down. And what class is it in? No. Bivalvia. Okay. Clams are bivalves. There's another shell behind there, by the way. Okay. This is not a spiral. Okay. That's because all mollusks have a foot inside them. So it makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. And what phylum is this in? Peripera. And if I told you this was not hard, then what class is it in? Demospongia. Right? Good. Okay. Does anybody remember what this is? What even is this thing? Like, what type of organism is it? Is it a fish? It's a sea squid. Okay, it's a tunicate. So now that you guys know that, what phylum is it in? Chordata. Yeah. Did we learn its class? No, but we did learn its subphylum, which is Urochordata. Right? Okay, good. So anyways, let's examine how each of these guys filter feeds. I put these arrows in here to show you guys the motion of the water. All right. So starting with the whale, it sucks in the water and then it shoots it out while closing its mouth, so it goes past its baleen. Right. Over here with the manta ray, it gulps in the water and passes it through its. Well, like what's specialized about their gills? Like. No, that's a sea star. Yeah. And what's so special about like gills that do filter feeding? Like it's a special structure inside the gills.
Like nets.
Yeah, but what are they called? Hey, what is it called? Anyone remember? Shaped like a. Nobody remembers? Gill rakers, right? Okay, gill rakers. Sponge, right? It goes in through where? The ostia, right? The pores on the side and it comes out the osculum. And for a clam, it goes in through the siphon and comes back out the siphon. Right? In this case, it just goes in through its little mucus house and it comes out of its house. And in this case, the water passes past its antennules, right? So different ways to do filter feeding, all trying to catch some similar prey, plankton. Right? Okay, cool. So let's move on. So I was mentioning copepods first because they actually eat plants and protists, right? But not all zooplankton eat plants. Some of them eat other animals, right? So zooplankton eat other zooplankton. Those guys would be carnivores. And here's an example, right? The arrowworm. Do you guys remember this is the sixth worm that we didn't spend that much time on? The ketonath. What does ketonath mean again? What is ketonath? Bristle jaws. Yeah, remember keto means bristle, nath means jaws. Hopefully we know nath from anatha, right? Okay, so bristle-jawed worms, arrowworms, right? These guys are a type of plankton that go around hunting copepods using their jaws, in which they do raptorial feeding to grab a copepod, right? Okay, so they eat copepods. Hopefully a lot of this stuff is coming back to your memory. Like it's a little good review that we need. Right? Okay, so ketonaths, right? Ketonaths and copepods. I just want to show you guys a quick demonstration of raptorial feeding with an actual raptor this time, right? Okay, and a raptor, by the way, is a bird of prey, and it has talons. Okay, so this video has highlighted a couple different concepts that we all talked about before, right? First, let's talk about the sea snake, right? A marine reptile. What was the problem with the marine reptile that led to its death? Having lungs, okay? Having lungs in the ocean is not a good idea, leaves it vulnerable at the surface, right? And we talked about its maximum dive time being limited because of this, right? Second of all, we saw the eagle grabbing it using his talons, raptorial feeding right there. Okay, grab its food. Did you guys notice what body part it was grabbing? Yeah, it was grabbing its head, right? Probably to prevent being bitten. Okay, because sea snakes are super venomous, right? And then it eats it, and then there you go, right? We noticed how the eagle can fly to its nest, which is placed up high in a tree where it doesn't have to worry so much, and it can check on its nest in case there's danger. What is that afforded by? What is it? Why is it allowed to be able to do that? Like, what evolutionary features does it have?
Wings.
Wings. What else?
The calcareous eggs.
Oh, it does have the calcareous eggs, but what enables it to fly? What else? What was the most important one? Warm blood, right? Okay, here we have a warm-blooded animal versus a cold-blooded animal. And the warm-blooded one is capable of flight. Right? Okay, so that was just an example of raptorial feeding. Okay, so hopefully it's pretty clear what that is. Here's another video about it, but I would like you guys to check it out. I guess the link is broken, but it just shows a bunch of lizards, and this guy drops like 1,000 crickets into his little terrarium, and then the lizards have food. So it's pretty cool. Okay, anyways, continuing on, right? Copepods and ketonath. The ketonath uses its jaws to do raptorial feeding to catch these copepods. But both of these guys are plankton. And the interesting thing about both of them is that when they come out of their egg, obviously it's a plankton, right? But guess what? This is its adult form. So even as an adult, it is plankton. So what does that mean? Born a plankton, as an adult of plankton, they stay plankton their whole lives. Because of that, we have the third classification scheme that we would like to call holoplankton, right? Holoplankton is to describe plankton that spends their whole life as a plankton. They will never stop becoming a plankton, right? They're just plankton floating around their whole lives, right? Here's some examples of holoplankton. Maybe we can notice a few of them. This is a ketonat. What else is in here that we might be able to figure out?
Megalops.
There's a megalops in here?
Right.
This one maybe?
Yeah.
It kind of looks like one, but no. And megalops is not a holoplankton, by the way, because it turns into a crab, right? So it's not a holoplankton, but good guess. This is probably an arthropod though, so yeah. But what else in here do we know that we just learned? You guys see it? What else in here?
The copepod?
Where do you see a copepod?
On the bottom corner?
The bottom left, right here. We have a copepod. There's actually another copepod. Can you guys find it?
The one on the top corner?
The top right. There you go. Okay. So we got some copepods, right? Copepods and ketonat are holoplankton. They stay plankton their whole lives. Here are some holoplankton that we've talked about before. That's the tunicate, right? It's called a larvation. Right? Ketonats, larvations, copepods, but I'm going to introduce real quick 3 more. So we have 6 examples of holoplankton. Okay, so let's go over those 6. Talk about what phyla they're in, and what they're called. Okay. All right. So starting from larvation, we've talked about this slightly. It's a type of tunicate. That's the actual organism, and it's beating, right? It's doing this. What's it trying to do? What do you guys think? It's trying to force the water past its mucus house that it built to do filter feeding, right? What's that water movement called? A feeding current, right? It creates a feeding current and forces it to pass. Very good. Okay, so continue on, right? Since it is a tunicate, that means it is a chordata, right? Phylum Chordata, subphylum Urochordata. Okay, with a little feed action.
So in a sense, it's like a whipping motion, right? It's a horse and then whipping it.
No. Because I mean, when you whip a horse, that's not the horse's body part. And
I mean, like, we know, like, when they're like back in the days when they had a wagon, they would go like that with like
Yeah.
both sides, like the same motion.
but like, what does that motion achieve though? Yeah, but I mean, like, that's the horse's legs moving. But it has nothing to do with this. It just looks like. Or just what?
No, I'm saying the motion of it, not the actual, like, the way it works.
You know, but I mean, like, even the motion of the whips doesn't move the air around it.
Okay.
So I don't see any similarities. Yeah. But I mean, it looks similar, but there are no similarities between that. Okay, so moving on, right? This thing. What is this, right? This is called a siphonophore. Anybody want to guess maybe what phylum this might be in? Not gonna lie, this one's pretty complicated. Demospongia, you know, that's a pretty good guess because these do kind of look like sponges, right? Those look like oscula, right? That's a good guess. But it's not a sponge, right? Sponges are usually stuck to the ground. What was that? A Nidarian? What makes you think it's a Nidarian?
Probably looks like it might have stinging cells.
It may look like it has stinging cells. Well, I would say if you said these things look like polyps, kind of, but without the tentacles, that might be a good reason. Right? So a siphonophore is in fact a cnidarian, right? Good. So it does have stinging cells. We can't see them. It doesn't really have tentacles. And notice it has a bunch of these. Now these are all individuals, kind of, right? They're all connected on this one body, but some scientists consider them to be individuals working together as a colony. All right, a colonial organism. All right, there's a lot of colonial organisms. Some are connected, some are not. Right? For example, one that is connected is like a coral. Right? A coral is a bunch of polyps working together. Something that's not connected would be ants. Okay? But colonial organism, right? These guys are like a colony, and they're all stuck together and they float around together. I think it's, I don't know, this is a pretty interesting animal because you don't know what is considered an individual and what is not. Because one time, it wasn't a siphonophore, it was actually a tunicate, right, called a salp. But they also formed colonies that look really similar to this. And I think those are really interesting because you might find one or two floating around in the ocean sometimes. But one time I was like out on a boat and I looked down and I saw like 5 little salps stuck together and they're just floating around. I don't know, I thought it was really cute because, I don't know, it was like a little family. And then I picked it up and one of them fell off. And that's kind of sad, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Right? Okay, so salp is not a cnidarian, but they do kind of look like this formation, right? A little colonial organism. Okay, so just know that this is called a siphonophore. To put more perspective into what else is considered a siphonophore, the Portuguese man-o-war is also considered a siphonophore, which is strange because it implies that this thing is a colonial organism. So it has different cells that are different individuals in its bladder and in its tentacles. It's all, like, it's hard to imagine. This looks like one animal to me, but it's actually a colony, right? It's really hard to explain. Okay, so a siphonophore, a cnidarian, a hydroid, right? This one is considered a colonial organism, right? But it's not this one's not a holoplankton, right? The siphonophore that you guys saw before was. Right, I just want to show you a picture real quick. Even though this is not a holoplankton, this is still a plankton because it floats around, and they wind up on the shores. And look at this picture of a guy pretending to step on it. What do you guys think? Safe or not safe? Not safe. It doesn't matter if a jellyfish is alive or dead. As long as it's moist, it could still sting you, right? So you shouldn't touch jellyfish, even though they're dead. Right? Okay, so back to our discussion of holoplankton. Here's something called a pteropod, all right? 2 different types of pteropods, one with like a cone-shaped shell and one with a more spiral shell. Well, based off that alone, maybe you guys can tell what phylum this is in. Anybody have any ideas? Mollusca, right? Because that shell reminds you of a snail, right? But the difference is this thing does not turn into a snail. This thing stays like this its whole life because it's a holoplankton, right? So they just float around like this. Pteropods, right? Ptero means wing, like pterodactyl, right? And foot means, or pod means foot because mollusks have a foot. So see, here's their foot. It's coming out kind of shaped like a wing, right? 2 wings, pteropods. And this general shape of a creature is also considered a veliger, but a veliger is usually referring to something that turns into an adult snail, which these guys don't, right? So these are pteropods. So we got copepods, ketonasts, and larvaceans, a tunicate, and a siphonophore, and a pteropod. And the last holoplankton we're going to talk about is this, a comb jelly. Now, comb jellies fooled a couple of you guys on that one quiz if I asked what's a cnidarian, right? But although it has jelly in its name, it's only because its body is gelatinous. This is not a cnidarian, all right? It's called a comb jelly because it's got these cone rows, right? So it's actually in the phylum Ctenophora, right? Don't pronounce the C again, right? Ctenophora. So these comb rows are called tenes, right? C-T-E-N-E-S. And what do you guys say? Do they have stinging cells or no?
No.
No. because otherwise they would be a cnidarian, right? So these guys do not have stinging cells. They're like jellyfish, but if you touch them, they're okay, right? Little comb rows instead. I've seen these guys before. They're pretty cool. I saw them when I was really small. And they appear to light up like this, but that's not its own light. It's not bioluminescence. It's actually reflected light from the sun, right? Or from the camera or wherever, right? So whenever something reflects a rainbow color pattern back to you, it's called iridescence, right? So I think I wrote that down. Jellyfish-like, no stinging cells, iridescence. Oh, yeah, here's a video of its iridescence, right? Let's take a look at that. Okay, so it just beats its little comb rows, its teens, and it creates this iridescent effect, right? So if you think about a prism, you pass light through a prism, and then it creates a rainbow, right? Iridescence is when you bounce light off of it, and it creates a rainbow. So examples is like peacock feather, right? Peacock feather is not actually colored like that. It's just that the little fibers are spaced so closely together they reflect light in an interesting way. And oil slicks, right? So you guys know an oil slick is rainbow colored, but the oil is not rainbow, it's like yellow, right? Okay, so that's iridescence, and then this kind of organism exhibits that type of iridescence right there. Okay, so if these guys are not cnidarians, no stinging cells, how do they catch prey? Well, they do have, some of them do have tentacles, as I had an earlier slide I skipped over, yeah, right here. See these? This one makes it a lot more convincing that we should call it a comb jelly, right? It kind of looks like a comb now, at least. These things are sticky, right? They use some sort of like adhesive to stick and hopefully catch prey with that. Okay, so if they're catching prey, that might be a type of suspension feeding, trying to get them stuck onto these tentacles, right? Okay, so these guys are super simple, and based off of their DNA, scientists think they might be the first animal. But just looking at this animal, it has some sort of structure to it that leads you to believe that, how could this possibly be the first animal? What is its symmetry?
Radio.
It's not radio, actually. Take a look. It's got those two tentacles. It's bilateral symmetry, right? If it didn't have those tentacles, it kind of looks radial, right? But it's got those tentacles, right? It's strange. How did it reach bilateral symmetry, but it doesn't have like a head or anything like that, right? So it's kind of hard to say, right? What is the first animal? Is it a ctenophore or is it a sponge? Who knows, right? But it's going to be one of those two, right? Super simple organisms. Okay, so now we know what a comb jelly actually is. A comb jelly is in the phylum Ctenophora, and it is a type of holoplankton. So they stay plankton their whole lives.
What was it here?
Oh, comb jellies is not a cnidarian. It's actually in the phylum Ctenophora, right? This Ctenophore, but this is an A instead. And they're a type of holoplankton, which means they stay plankton its whole life. Okay, so we just talked about all 6 of the different types of holoplankton now. Now let's examine something else, right? So I just do a quick search on Google of common zooplankton, and I found this picture, nothing crazy, right? I just want to show you that when I looked at this picture, turns out that just in a random picture I found 6 out of 10 of these guys are arthropoda, right? Arthropods truly are diverse. They're the most diverse phylum out there, and most most zooplankton are in fact arthropoda. Do you guys recognize one of these arthropods at least? Which one is it? This one right here, the copepod, right? Notice what they call it, cyclops. Why do they call it that? Because it has one eye, right? Okay, so anyways, arthropods, right? Let's talk about copepods. It's a type of arthropod, and another familiar arthropod, a zoea. This is an arthropod, isn't it? Right? What do you guys know about this arthropod?
What is that?
Into
Arthropod?
which arthropod?
Crab?
A crab, right? Yeah. So these are both arthropods right over here, but there's a main difference. The copepod, we've already said before, stays a plankton its whole life, right? But the zoea does not. The zoea turns into a crab. Is a crab a plankton? Why is it not a plankton? Because it walks around, okay? It does not just drift around at the mercy of the currents, right? It actually walks around. So this is a type of plankton that stops being a plankton at one point, right? Undergoes larval settlement, and then becomes an adult crab, right? You see how it stops being plankton, right? Plankton that start out their lives as plankton and then it stops being plankton as an adult are called meroplankton, right? So the megalops and the zoea, those are two different types of meroplankton, right? Meroplankton, a type of plankton that stops being a plankton at some point in its life, maybe turns into something that's not a plankton, right? We'll go over different examples, something like that. Okay, meroplankton. Okay, so keep in mind, we are now on the third classification scheme via life history, right? The first one was by size, the second one was by producer or consumer, and the third one is by the life history. How did they spend their lives, right? And so in this case, we're now talking about the plankton that stopped being plankton at one point in their lives and do something else, right? And those are called meroplankton. Let's look at other things, right? So first of all, we know that these guys, right, these meroplankton turn into a crab, right? So let me show you a bunch of other meroplankton and you guys tell me what they turn into, all right? So this one's pretty easy, right? What do you guys think this one turns into? A fish, right? Good. This one turns into a fish. In fact, this is a cod larva, right? This is actually the last larval type, and we're gonna learn what it's called in a second. Okay. What about that? What does that turn into? A snail, right? What is this, by the way? This is a villager, right? Yeah, it turns into a snail. What about this? What is it and what does it turn into? It's a pluteus. Yeah, and what does it turn into? Remember? This turns into a sea star. Very good, yeah. Alright, next one. Remember that one? This one's called a planula, and it turns into a jellyfish. Yeah, okay, so all these familiar larval types that we've all talked about, turns out these guys are all meroplankton because look at what they turn into. Something that's no longer a plankton, right? All these guys are meroplankton. The only one that we haven't named yet is the fish, right? Okay, so we know the top one. What was this again? Zoea, villager, pluteus, planula, and 11, like the number, right? It's a strange name, right? Well, a fish larva, called an 11, right? That is larval type for the fish, and it'll grow to be like that. Let's examine all these closely to make sure that they actually are meroplankton, and they actually did indeed stop being plankton at one point in their lives. The zoea. Is the crab a plankton? No, so we're all good, right? It walks around. Is the snail a plankton? No, it crawls around, so we're all good, right? It's a meroplankton. Is this a plankton? No, it crawls around using its what? Using its 2 feet. Very good. So it is not a plankton. We're all good. What about this? Is this a plankton? We have a problem here. Is a planula a meroplankton then? On the outside, it seems like the answer is no. Think back, and I want you guys to check back the definition. Meroplankton is something that stops being plankton at one point in its life. Does it happen or does it not happen? It does happen? When? As a polyp. Every jellyfish was once attached to the substrate as a polyp. You guys remember that? And then it comes off and flips over and turns into a medusa. So even though the adult form is a jellyfish, the planula is a meroplankton. It's not a holoplankton because it is not a plankton its whole life. You guys see that? Right? If it were a plankton its whole life, then it would just turn directly from here to here, plankton to plankton. But no, it actually stops being plankton at one point as a polyp, and therefore it's in this group. Okay? And this last one, is this a plankton? Why is this not a plankton? Because it can swim around against the ocean's currents. Therefore, even though it doesn't crawl around like these ones do, this is also not a plankton. But a tiny fish like this is, right? Because it cannot swim against the current. But when it grows up, it will be able to. Stops being a plankton. These 5 are examples of meroplankton. Okay? Is everybody okay with that? Satisfied with that? Everybody knows how to classify plankton now, right? Every plankton that you guys see should be able to be classified by any of the 3 methods, right? You can assign 3 different names to each plankton, right? Let's go with the zoea, for example, right? The zoea is meroplankton, right? Because it doesn't stay plankton its whole life. It is a zooplankton because it's an animal, it's a consumer. And depending on how big it is, I don't know exactly how big it is, but let's just guess, it might be a mesoplankton, right? So you can use any of the different classification schemes to classify a plankton, okay? And then for every different type of plankton out there, you might be able to give it 3 possible names, okay? Or 3 possible groups, right? Classify them. Okay, cool. So finish with this lecture. Now we are gonna take a quick break before we go on to the next one. But if you guys didn't get a chance the other day, I highly recommend checking out this thing. So hopefully there's Protist in there. If it's not, I actually found a small wet spot that there might be some Protist in there. It's like completely dry now, so it's crazy. I don't know how they survive. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? We're good? Oh, Tiffany, you have a question?
I was just wondering if hydrates would be considered.
Oh, siphonophores? Not all of them. Yeah, so a siphonophore is a type of hydroid. Yeah, so some of them are siphonophores, some of them are not. Okay? Yeah, there's a lot of different organisms inside siphonophore. Because remember, some of them are still attached to the ground. Yeah, and some of them float around like the Portuguese man. So, good question.